Hi, this is Stories to Fall Asleep or in Love To. I'm Jo, known as the Traumatized Poet on social media, and I've written these stories both as a coach and as an artist to help you understand what it's like to truly be loved, seen, cared for, and fought for. I record these episodes in my cupboard. The only witnesses are a teapot named Cliff, and now you. I hope you settle, I hope you can relax, and I hope you sleep tight. Enjoy. Case file: premeditated heartbreak. Filed in: the body, the bed, the silence between us. Exhibits A to J. Current status: reopened voluntarily. Assigned analyst: primary witness. This isn't just a love story. It's a record, a quiet archive of what happens when trust begins to rot beneath the surface, slowly, subtly, before anyone dares to name it. What you're about to hear is not fiction, and it isn't linear. These are emotional exhibits gathered in the aftermath of betrayal, composed in the rooms where the silence grew louder than the affection. What remains has been recorded here for internal reference and review. Relationship report. Internal notes. Unresolved attachment. Subject entered relationship with full consent and clear emotional intent. No initial signs of fracture were visible to outsiders. However, internal indicators began presenting early. Changes in tone, patterns, and presence from the other party. These were noted but not addressed directly at the time. Primary symptoms were intuition misread as insecurity, touch offered without connection, smiles that arrived late to the face. Evidence began compiling quietly. No direct confrontation, no clear confession, just a growing silence that shifted the air. What follows is a collection of emotional documentation gathered across multiple locations: a hotel by the sea, a rooftop party, a familiar cafe, a bed that once felt like a sanctuary. Exhibits include, but are not limited to, emotional withdrawal, inconsistencies in narrative, unexplained absence, the reappearance of a third party, and the subject's eventual return to the site of emotional injury. The goal of this file is not conviction. It is clarity, not to blame, but recognition. This report does not resolve neatly. The ending remains under review. Exhibit A. The shift. Filed under the knowing without knowing. Filed in his changing voice, her unchanging instinct. Testimony by primary witness. I knew he was cheating before he did it out loud. Before names, before timelines, before the party, the touch, the kiss he will say meant nothing. I knew. He changed subtly, like a chord gone slightly out of tune. Still music, but no longer a song I could sing along. He laughed less, or maybe more, but it wasn't real. He touched me like he was borrowing the shape of closeness, but not the feeling. There was distance in his eyes, even when we were face to face, like he was already looking at someone else. His phone became a country with closed borders. His stories got shorter, his showers got longer, his kindness got performative. Like he was playing the part of a good man instead of just being one. No one told me. No messages, no lipstick on collars, just instinct. The feral, awful ache in your stomach when love goes missing but hasn't left the house yet. I asked him, if something was wrong. He said, "You're being dramatic," and kissed my forehead like he was tucking me in before going out to sin. And still I stayed, not because I didn't know, but because I needed to hear him say it. I wasn't built for guessing games. I needed the truth, even when the silence was already screaming it. Exhibit B. The trip. Filed under things she knew and still let happen. Filed in room 407, the Kempinski, site of emotional interrogation. Testimony by primary witness. One of those far-off places where the silence cost extra and the towels no too much. I booked it so he couldn't run, so we'd have nowhere to hide but in each other. And I was done playing muse to a ghost. He got so angry when he found out I'd stayed in this exact hotel with my ex before. Burst open like something primal, not the quiet man I'd grown to read like a well-worn poem, but a storm that screamed mine without saying the word. And I thought, there it is, the truth hiding in the cracks of his control. He'd been distant for weeks. I knew something was rotting, but he kept serving me smiles like wine, aged, sweet, and full of lies. Then it was my turn. I told him what I knew, the questions I stopped asking, the nights I felt him leave the bed without moving. And I said it. Say it. And he did. I touched her. I kissed her. At Sean's party on the rooftop. The first time he said it out loud. Not a metaphor. Not a spin, just truth. Dropped into the room like a match we both watched burn. He left. He always leaves. I found him on the beach with his hands buried in the sand like he was trying to hide them from what they'd done. Only that, he said, as if only could unclench my fists. Not cheating, like the word had an asterisk next to it, like heartbreak had clauses. He said it didn't mean anything. I said neither did this anymore, but I didn't move. Because I'm the kind of woman who stays just long enough to make sure the wound scars properly. The ocean didn't say a thing. She never does. She just watched as I fell apart, very beautifully, very again. Exhibit C. The night we didn't lie. Filed under the hardest truths wrapped in the softest hands. Filed in the edge of the bed where confessions hold their breath. Testimony by subject. I cried while we got ready for bed. Told her I didn't want to lose her, but the words came out too late, like I hadn't already pushed her away 100 quiet moments before that. We laid awake, not speaking, not really, just breathing near each other, pretending to sleep while our thoughts screamed into pillows. Then I gathered my courage, not to defend myself, just to finally tell her the truth. To say it first for once, to own what I'd done before she had to ask. But she beat me to it. She looked at me like she already knew but needed to hear it anyway. Why did you do it? Her voice didn't accuse. It broke. And I knew I owed her more than just silence and sad eyes. So I told her the truth. I didn't feel like I deserved you. You kept loving me like I was someone I couldn't see in myself yet, and instead of rising to meet that, I folded. I sabotaged it, because if I destroyed it myself, at least I wouldn't have to watch you leave me for the right reasons. I wasn't proud of it. I'm still not. I took a breath and kept going. She was easy. She didn't know me. She didn't expect anything real. It was loud and messy and meaningless. I didn't even like her. I just wanted to disappear into something that wouldn't reflect who I was failing to be. Then I looked at her. She hadn't looked away once, and somehow that made it harder. I tried to find my words again and said, "You loved me without asking me to be perfect. You asked me to be more than I am. Not with words, just by loving me. And I don't know how to hold that kind of mirror without seeing everything I hate. You showed me who I could be, and I hated that I couldn't get there fast enough. That was the truth, not polished, not easy, but real. She didn't say anything right away, just nodded, and I could tell she'd already knew, but hearing it still hurt. Because knowing something in your gut and having it confirmed in someone else's voice are two very different things. Exhibit D, what she replied. Filed under, loving him wasn't enough to keep her. Filed in, the gap between knowing and leaving. Testimony by primary witness. I looked at him. God, he looked so sorry, so undone, and I hated that I still wanted to reach for him. I said, "You broke my heart quietly, bit by bit, like a leak I kept mopping up because you thought the flood was in my head. I would have forgiven the truth, if you would have given to me before it bled all over us." He said nothing. He couldn't, so I kept going. "I'm not mad that you were broken. I'm mad that you didn't tell me where it hurt before you let it decide for you. I could have held it with you. I wanted to." My voice cracked. Finally. That was the moment I felt the weight shift, not off my chest, but deeper into it. "I still love you," I whispered. "That's the worst part." And I meant it, every syllable. Exhibit E, the second day, filed under the ache of choosing someone who doesn't know how to stay chosen. Filed in room 407, spa schedule, and a one-way ticket. Testimony by primary witness. In the morning we had sex. Not the kind that heals, the kind that bags, soft at first, like we were testing if our bodies could still speak the language our hearts had long forgotten. I spent most of the day at the spa. Steam, silence, and strangers felt better than one more conversation where he said nothing with too many words. After that I went to the gym, just to be away, to sweat out the ache before it could settle behind my ribs. We didn't talk much. He stayed in the room. I stayed in my body, barely. Later we had dinner, ordered food we didn't taste, laughed too loud at nothing. Everything about it felt like a cover-up. His eyes did that thing again, looked away right before I could fall into them. They used to hold me. Now they flinch. After dessert, I told him I was flying home that night, that I'd already booked it. He didn't ask when, didn't say don't. Back in the room, I started packing, slowly, zipping up pieces of something we never finished building. The tears dripping into the suitcase would be the only souvenir I bring home. He sat on the sofa in the corner, watching, like a man realizing his whole life was collapsing quietly in the time it takes to pack a suitcase. When I was ready to leave, I sat beside him, quiet. "This is it, right?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, kissed his forehead, the kind of kiss you give someone when you love them, but not enough to keep losing yourself. Then I left. No slammed doors, no drama, no asking him to stop me, and he didn't. And that was the second worst part. Exhibit F, the in-between. Filed under 7 months of trying to forget without erasing. Filed in nowhere in particular, everywhere that hurt. Testimony by primary witness. I started crying again the moment I boarded the plane, and I didn't stop, not really, for what must have been 3 weeks. People think heartbreak looks like crying on the floor, but really, it looks like brushing your teeth while your chest aches and no one knows. It looks like ordering your coffee with his name still sitting on your tongue, but saying oat milk instead. The first month I was a shell with good mascara. I answered texts, went to dinners, told my friends I was fine, in the same tone I use when I say, "No receipt, thank you." I blocked him, then unblocked him, then muted the thread because I didn't trust myself not to go digging through our history like a crime scene. I journaled like I was trying to leave proof that I still existed. I asked questions I already knew the answer to, tried not to miss the way his voice dipped when he said something that mattered, or the way his hands always found mine mid-sentence, like it needed something to hold the truth with. I listened to songs I should have skipped. I reread text I shouldn't have saved. I saw his face in crowds, in shadows, and strangers who smelled like him. I disappeared quietly. I skipped birthdays, brunches, anything that might involve the same people, asking the same questions with eyes that already knew too much. I told our mutual friends I was busy, that I needed time, but really, I couldn't stand how his name still lingered, even when no one said it out loud. I didn't want updates, didn't want to hear he looked sad or was doing his best. I didn't care who saw who where, just needed space to miss him in peace. I buried myself in work, answered emails with shaky hands, took on new clients, new projects, told myself that being useful was the same as being okay. I wrote like it was a ritual, not poetry, not yet, just survival with line breaks, each page a place to put the ache, so it wouldn't keep echoing inside my body. I stopped sleeping on one side of the bed, like I was still making room for someone who never really stayed. Around month 4, something shifted. I stopped waiting for the apology and started offering myself a new vocabulary. One that didn't make me the broken one that didn't end every sentence with, "But I should have known better." I burned old notes, saged the hell out of my living room, spoke to the ache like it was a student, and I was finally ready to teach it something softer. By month 7, I could say his name without folding in half. I threw away the last t-shirt he left in my drawer. I still thought about him, but it stopped feeling like hope and started feeling like history. And still, I hadn't gone back to the cafe, not yet, not because I couldn't, but because I knew the moment I did, something would begin again, and I needed to be ready for what that meant. Exhibit G, the restart, filed under, the case she thought was closed, filed in, our old cafe, 11:07 a.m., no exit strategy, testimony by primary witness. I was ready to go back. It had been long enough to stop flinching at his name, long enough for the grief to turn into something softer. And more than anything, I didn't want him to stand in the way of something that brought me peace. I loved that cafe, before him, before the undoing, and I deserved to love it again, on my own terms. And that morning I felt a pull, not toward him, toward myself, toward the quiet reclamation of something that used to taste like joy. So I walked in, sat at the table near the window, ordered the same cappuccino I used to drink when I still believed love could be saved by proximity. And then, of course, he walked in. Same coat, same scent, somehow, like ocean and citrus and memory. But something about him had changed. Lighter, maybe, like he was finally walking beside himself instead of dragging the weight of what he'd done. He saw me, paused, gave that half smile I used to collect like souvenirs. "Hey," he said from a distance, like it hadn't been a lifetime, like he hadn't once broken my heart very slowly, very beautifully. He smiled, soft, uncertain, like he didn't know if I'd let him exist in my world again, but I nodded before I could stop myself. He came over slowly, like someone crossing into sacred ground, and sat down at the table where we once planned the future we never arrived at. We didn't talk about the hotel, or the beach, or the day I walked away. Instead, we talked like strangers with a secret. He told me about therapy, about how it helped him learn that love is not supposed to feel like survival, That shame is loud when left alone too long, that you can't outrun your own reflection forever. At one point he said, "I've been coming here, a lot, not hoping to see you, just because this place gives me peace. It reminds me of the good parts, the ones I ruined. And maybe that's why you came too." I nodded, because he was right. And I watched his eyes. They didn't dart or dim. They met mine, held still, finally unafraid to be seen. "I'm not asking for another chance," he said, "but I'd like to earn one. Would you maybe want to try again? Not as us, but as who we are now." He smiled, a little braver this time. "Can I take you on a second date? Because today, this was our first." I didn't answer right away. I looked at the way the light hit his face. Same cheekbones, same mouth, but a completely different man sitting behind it. And I said yes, not because I missed him, but because for the first time I didn't. And it felt like a beginning instead of a relapse. Exhibit H, The Woman. Filed under the chapter no one prepares you for. Filed in Sean's party, witness identification and emotional residue. Testimony by primary witness. We met her later, not by design, just one of those cruel little coincidences life throws at you when it wants to check if you're really over it. Exactly 364 days later, Sean's party, same rooftop, same playlist on loop, cheap wine and boring cocktails, and someone's laugh echoing too loud over the speakers. She was at the bar, of course. The universe has a sense of humor, or maybe just a grudge. He saw her first, when still like the air had thickened around his ribs. She turned around, said his name and smiled, kind, polite. Her voice was familiar, not because I heard it, but because I'd imagined it 100 times in the dark. He introduced us, not nervously, just careful, measured, like he knew exactly how many seconds it would take before the tension started humming. She didn't know who I was, not really, not then, but I did. I smiled like it was nothing, said hello, said her name back to her like I'd practiced it, like I hadn't once stared at it in a sentence that cracked my world open. She was lovely, of course she was, plain in a beautiful way, simple, soft-eyed, nothing wrong with her, nothing at all, unaware of the role she'd played in a scene that was never really hers. Just a girl who happened to be standing in the middle of a wound she didn't know she helped create. He glanced at me as if asking, "Are you okay?" And I was, almost, because by the time I met her, I had already let the anger go, not because she deserved it, but because I did. I don't remember what we talked about, something shallow, something safe. She left before it got awkward, polite wave, clean exit, no blood spilled, and no idea what kind of history had just passed through her orbit. When she was gone, we stood in silence for a moment. I didn't say anything, but I felt it, just a flicker in my chest, a shadow of a storm long past. And he must have seen it, the way my fingers curled around my drink, the way my breath held still. He reached for my hand gently and said, "Hey, I saw you go quiet. I know that must have felt strange, even if you're okay, but just seeing her again. But I want you to know, she's not part of my life, not even in memory. She's just noise I once mistook for something I needed. Being here tonight, seeing her again, it didn't shake me. It reminded me how far I've come from that version of myself. She was part of the worst decision I ever made, but seeing her now, it just confirmed something I already knew. I was never choosing her. I was trying to escape myself. And I know it's not your job to believe that, but I hope it makes something inside you feel safer." He held my gaze, no shame, no performance, just presence. And for the first time, his words didn't sound like damage control. They sounded like truth. I believed him because my body didn't flinch, because my breath stayed steady, because my trust wasn't fragile anymore. It had roots now, not in him, but in myself. That's the difference, isn't it, when trust isn't a gamble, but a knowing. That's the thing about healing. It doesn't erase the past, it just teaches you how to stand in the same room with it and stay whole. Exhibit I, the return. Filed under the way we came back to each other. Filed in her body, reclaimed with consent. Testimony by primary witness. It didn't happen right away, not after the apology, not after the kiss on the second date, not even the first night I stayed over after the break. We waited, not because we had to, but because we wanted to, because this time the relationship mattered more than the release. The attraction was never the problem. That part had always worked, effortless, magnetic, dangerously easy. But this time we wanted to make sure we weren't using sex to cover a wound still healing. It almost happened before. I was drunk, messy, laughing, sweet after a night out with the girls. I pressed against him, all lips and nostalgia. He held my waist, pulled me close, then whispered, "We shouldn't." So we didn't, and I loved him more for that. But tonight was different. We left Sean's party hand in hand, sober, steady, full of a kind of quiet anticipation that only exists between two people who already know every inch of each other, but are meeting again for the first time. No one rushed. He made tea. I lit a candle, not for romance, for presence. And when I climbed into his lap, nothing inside me hesitated. He leaned back on the bed, and I straddled him, not for control, for closeness, to feel his chest rise beneath mine, to see the way his eyes softened the moment my thighs wrapped around him. I moved slowly, deliberately, like we had all night, because we did. His hands slid along my hips, fingertips grounding me, guiding me, but never taking over. We didn't kiss at first. We just looked at each other, that kind of eye contact that feels like a vow without a single word being said. When I started moving, his hands came to my breast, palms warm, familiar. Then his mouth, soft at first and purposeful, sucking gently, like worship, like he'd missed the taste of being allowed to love me again. He moaned into my skin when I ran my hands through his hair, and I smiled because I was finally home, in a body that once felt like a battleground. It was slow, but it wasn't quiet. We both gasped, laughed, touched like we were discovering something ancient and entirely new. When I came, I didn't hold back, didn't rush. I let him see all of it. And when he followed, eyes open, hands on my waist, breath tangled in my name, I saw the truth in his body before he ever had to say it again. He was here, fully, finally. Exhibit I, point 2. The return, filed under the night he was finally allowed back in. Filed in, his hands, finally still. Testimony by the subject. There was a night she pressed against me, drunk, glowing, reckless with wanting, and I wanted her so badly it hurt. But I said, we shouldn't, because I knew I hadn't earned that version of her yet, the soft one, the open one, the one who didn't flinch when I reached for her. But tonight wasn't like that. She was quiet, clear-eyed, no whine, no armor, just presence, like she'd finally come back to her own body, and maybe was willing to let me near it. She sat beside me first, not on me, not in that way, just beside me, close enough to feel my warmth, far enough to keep her choice. We talked about nothing really, and then she laughed, not the small kind, the real kind, and I realized I hadn't heard that sound without a guard in it for a very, very long time. And that's when I knew, if this happened tonight, it wouldn't be about fixing something. It would be about witnessing it rise from the wreckage. Before, I would have turned this into urgency. I would have tried to win her back with rhythm and pressure and heat, some performance of passion meant to cover up the guilt. But now, I just wanted to meet her there, exactly as I was. And I'll be honest, I didn't know what to do with my hands at first. I didn't want to ruin it, didn't want to move too quickly or reach in a way that said, I still think this is mine. So when she finally climbed onto my lap, I froze for half a second. Not because I didn't want it, because I wanted it too much, and I knew what it had cost her to offer it. She moved slowly, deliberately, and I didn't guide her, didn't lead, I just let her move. This wasn't seduction, it was remembering, relearning her body like a language I'd once spoken fluently and was now afraid to mispronounce. So I followed her breath, let my hands trace the path her hips began, and when I kissed her breasts, it wasn't to excite her, it was because I missed the sound she makes when she forgets how long I made her wait. She didn't flinch, didn't perform, she just let herself be seen. She kept her eyes open, so did I, because if she was going to let me be here, really here, I wasn't going to miss it. And I stayed beneath her because I wanted her to know I'm not here to conquer, I'm here to hold. She let go first. I felt it. I watched it, like sunlight pouring through something I thought would never open again. When she came, I almost did too, just from watching. But I waited because this wasn't about me reaching something. It was about her finally letting me in. And when I finally let go, it felt less like release and more like forgiveness. Not hers, mine. Because in that moment, I didn't feel like the man who hurt her. I felt like the man she wanted anyway. Exhibit J, the morning after. Filed under, the first time he said it again. Filed in, between the sheets and the first cup of coffee. Testimony by primary witness. The light came in quiet, like it didn't want to interrupt. The light came in quiet, like it didn't want to interrupt. I woke up first, still on top of him, his hands resting low on my back, like we had fallen asleep mid-conversation. The sheets were tangled around our legs, my thighs ached that sweet, holy way, and his breath steady beneath me, like he hadn't exhaled properly in months until last night. I stayed still for a while, tracing the lines of his collarbone with my eyes, memorizing the shape of peace before the world could touch it. And then he stirred, opened his eyes, looked at me like he couldn't believe I was real and still here. We didn't speak at first, didn't need to. The silence was full in that way it rarely is. He reached for my face, tucked a piece of hair behind my ear, like it was a ritual, like it had meaning. And then he said it, not with weight, not with drama, just, I love you. Like it was the most obvious thing in the room, like it had been sitting between us all night, waiting for someone to finally say it out loud. I didn't cry, I didn't freeze, I didn't wonder if he meant it because I felt it. In the way he looked at me, in the way his fingers curled around my waist, like they remembered every version of me. And I said it back because it wasn't a question. It was a truth that had made it through every fire we set. And I said it back because it wasn't a question. It was a truth that had made it through every fire we set. We lay there with the windows cracked open, letting spring air and second chances in. No rush, no need to prove anything, just skin, breath, and a love without conditions. And for the first time in this entire story, I wasn't waiting for the catch. Bonus exhibit. Filed under the fire I chose not to feed. Filed in 2:14 a.m. to 8:06 a.m. My apartment, almost. Testimony by subject. I didn't expect a text. You up, she wrote. Short, casual, dangerous. It was just after 2. I just made tea. No part of me thought she'd actually come. And yet, when she showed up 5 minutes later, it made terrible kind of sense. She looked like chaos dressed in poetry. Lipstick slightly worn, hair full of city wind, that black dress, same one from a night I never forget, and she wore it like it hadn't been stitched to ruin me. She didn't wait, didn't ask, just kissed me, hard, warm, already home. I kissed her back, of course I did. I'd imagined this moment more than I'd admit. But when her hands reached my jaw, when her body pressed against mine like memory, I felt it, to pull towards something we weren't ready for. So I pulled back, not to reject, just to breathe. Her forehead met mine. She was breathing like she wanted to ask me something but didn't trust the answer. Let's sit, I'd say. Not to deflect, to protect. She stepped inside, slipped out of her heels like it was still her apartment, like her body didn't know we'd broken. We sat on a couch. She curled into me, comfortable, electric. My heart was trying to outrun the moment. Her voice was low and loose with wine. Every word felt like a second chance we weren't sure how to cash in. Then her hand slid under my shirt, soft, familiar, like a question I wanted to say yes to. And I wanted to let her. But I caught her wrist, held it still, not to push her away, to anchor us. We shouldn't, I said. Not because I didn't want her, because I did so much it physically hurt to stop. Because she was drunk, because I wasn't, because we were healing now, not undoing, because love without clarity was the very thing that broke us. She looked at me, not hurt, not angry, just seeing, like she already knew the answer but needed to watch me choose it anyway. She didn't test the line, just sat back, bit her lip again, this time quieter, and somehow that undid me more than anything else. She kissed my cheek, said, okay. I offered the couch, she said, just stay. So we did, her back to my chest. Our hands met somewhere under the covers. No pressure, just presence. She fell asleep first. I stayed awake because, for once, wanting her wasn't the same as having her. And holding her hand like that felt like more than all the nights we used to rush through. I woke up before her. She was curled away from me, but close enough that the heat remained. One leg tangled in the blanket, the other folded toward me, like her body didn't realize we were still being careful. There was mascara smudged under her eye, not from crying, just the kind of tired that settles behind your ribs when you've been strong too long. I didn't move, didn't adjust my pillow. I just stayed there, watching her rest like I'd been given permission I didn't want to waste. Her hand was still inside mine, looser now, but still there, like some quiet proof that we hadn't undone anything. When she stirred, I closed my eyes again, just to feel what it was like to wake beside her without guilt. When she stirred, I closed my eyes again, just to feel what it was like to wake beside her without guilt. She whispered, thanks for not letting me ruin it. I didn't answer, didn't need to. We both knew I almost had, twice. She sat up, gathered her things, picked up her shoes the way people carry fragile things they're not sure belong to them anymore. She looked at me once, no smile, but something in her eyes said, "This mattered." And then she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her, and I lay back in the same place, aware, finally, that restraint had never felt so much like love.